the 6th of April, 1941. With hundreds of Luftwaffe fighters dropping bombs on Belgrade, Nazi Germany, under the code name Operation Retribution, starts the invasion of Yugoslavia. 19 German divisions, supported by additional Italian, Hungarian, and Bulgarian troops, conquer the country in 11 days. On the 10th of April 1941, before the surrender of the Yugoslav army, the Germans and the Italians endorsed the proclamation of the so-called Independent State of Croatia by the fanatically nationalist, fascist, separatist, and terrorist Ustasha organization. After seizing power, the Ustasha authorities erect numerous concentration camps in Croatia, in which they will isolate and murder Jews, Serbs, Roma people, and other non-Catholic minorities, as well as Croatian political and religious opponents of the regime. The largest of these camps, Jasenovac, will become the third largest concentration camp in Europe, notorious for its barbaric practices and the large number of its victims. One of Jasenovac's detention facilities, Stara Gradiška, is specifically constructed for women and children of Serb, Jewish, and Romani ethnicity. Its deputy commandant becomes a man who is particularly active in the murders of the camp's child prisoners. His name is Ante Vrban. Ante Vrban was born on the 15th of January 1908 in a small settlement of Pajakusha, near the town of Gospić, today's Croatia, then part of Austria-Hungary. After the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, Gospić became part of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. On the 3rd of October 1929, the official name of the state was changed to Kingdom of Yugoslavia by King Alexander I. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Before Hitler came to power in Germany, there was not much anti-Semitism in Yugoslavia. However, as Nazi Germany began to systematically persecute German Jews, anti-Semitism in Yugoslavia also mounted. After the war broke out, the Yugoslav government wanted to appease the Germans, so it passed 2 anti-Jewish laws in October 1940. The first law fixed a quota for Jews entering secondary schools and universities. The second banned Jews from buying and selling certain food items. Intellectuals and the Serbian public strenuously objected to these laws, to no avail. On the 10th of April 1941, 4 days after the invasion of Yugoslavia, the Germans and Italians endorsed the proclamation of the so-called Independent State of Croatia by the fascist and terrorist Ustasha organization. After the formation of the Independent State of Croatia, Ante Vrban, who worked as a trading assistant before the war, joined the Ustasha militia. Ustasha members fiercely hated Serbs, Jews, communists, and non-Catholics. The Ustasha regime murdered or expelled hundreds of thousands of Serbs residing in its territory. In rural areas, Croatian military units and Ustasha militia burned down entire Serbian villages and murdered the inhabitants, frequently torturing men and raping women. In all, Croat authorities killed between 320 and 340,000 ethnic Serbs in Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina between 1941 and 1942. By May 1941, the Ustasha formed the Jadovno concentration camp in the Croatian region of Lika, where they incarcerated and executed thousands of ethnic Serbs and other prisoners. On the 27th of July, the uprising started against the Ustasha in the village of Serb. The uprising was initiated by the local population in response to the persecution of Serbs by the Ustasha, and was led by Chetniks and Yugoslav partisans who then cooperated for the benefit of the uprising. The Chetniks were armed bands of Serbs loyal to the Yugoslav royal house, aiming to restore it to the throne after the war, and the Yugoslav partisans was the communist-led anti-fascist resistance to the Axis powers. The uprising soon spread across the Lika region, where the village of Serb was located, and the Bosanska Krajina region. The uprising was suppressed by the Germans with unspeakable cruelty, causing many deaths and widespread destruction. Ante Vrban took part in the killings of Serbs in Lika, as well as in the killings of Jews in the Jadovno concentration camp. The Jadovno Ustasha death camp was located deep in the Velebit Mountains, at 1,250 meters above sea level, 22 kilometers northwest of the town of Gospic. Inmates were usually killed by being pushed into deep ravines located near the camp. The camp existed for only 3 months, but estimates of the number of deaths at Jadovno range from 10 to 68,000, mostly Serbs. The pit where inmates were executed and dumped was located 5 kilometers, or 3.1 miles from the camp. A long line of victims bound together were brought by the Ustasha to the pit mouth. Those who were at the beginning of the line, executioners killed in their usual ways, with axes, subcutters or mallets, or with rifle butts or by gunfire, and then pushed them down into the pit. 4 or 5 falling bodies would take the whole line with them, and up to 100 people would get dragged down in this way. Once inmates were thrown into the ravine, hand grenades were sometimes hurled inside in order to kill off the victims, and sometimes dogs would also be thrown in to feed on the wounded and the dead. There was no mercy, even for babies. The youngest victim of Jadovno was 6 months old. There are testimonies from both Serbs and Croats that the Ustasha, after filling the pits with human bodies, covered them with concrete, soil and leaves to hide their tracks. The Jadovno camp was closed on the 21st of August 1941, and the remaining Croat inmates were transferred to other Ustasha-controlled camps, while the remaining Serbs and Jews were murdered. Work on the replacement Jasenovac concentration camp started in the same month, and the area in which the Jadovno camp was located was later handed over to the Italians. For a short time, Verban became commandant of the Slana concentration camp, located on Pag Island. The Catholic canon of Pag, Don Joso Felicinovic, who initially helped establish Ustasha authority on Pag, later wrote that Slana became an Auschwitz-Dachau in miniature, a camp in which innocent men, women and children were killed in all kinds of bestial ways. On his first visit to the abandoned Slana camp, Felicinovic found a piece of cardboard on the wall of the main Ustasha barracks, on which records were kept of the women and girls raped in the camp, with their names and the dates and by which Ustasha. On the 13th of November 1941, Verban, already having the experience from the Jadovno and Slana camps, arrived together with a group of arrested Freemasons at Stara Gradiška, which was one of the 5 detention facilities of the Jasenovac camp complex, established between August 1941 and February 1942. At Stara Gradiška, Verban became the deputy to camp commandant Mile Orešković. Stara Gradiška, a subcamp of the Jasenovac concentration camp, was specially constructed for women and children of Serb, Jewish, and Romani ethnicity. Victims also included communist and anti-fascist Croats and Bosniaks. Ante Vrban was known for his brutality and took part in mass murders and also in the individual killings of prisoners. However, he was particularly noted for the murder of children. After the war, Stara Gradiška survivor Jordana Friedlander recalled, "At that time, new women and children were arriving at the camp in Stara Gradiška every day. A few weeks later, Ante Vrban ordered all the children to be separated from their mothers and put in one room. 10 of us were ordered to take them there. The children were crawling around the room, and one child put his arm and leg through the door, so the door would not be closed. Verban shouted, 'Push!' When I did not do so, he slammed the door and broke the child's leg. Then Verban grabbed the child by the leg and slammed the child against the wall until he was dead. After that, he continued to carry the children into the room. When the room was full, Verban brought poison gas and killed them all." Lidija Zlatic, a Croatian woman and a survivor of Stara Gradiška, in her testimony about the summer of 1942, talked about the Serbian civilians coming to the camp and about the suffering of children. She said, "This summer was also marked by the terrible death of children. During the so-called cleaning of Kozara, entire families from the surrounding villages were brought to the camp. Healthy men and women, boys and girls were sent to work in Germany and Norway. The elderly and children stayed in the camp, from where large groups of older people were leaving in an unknown direction. The children had their camp. They were all sick, suffering from dysentery, scarlet fever, colic, and spotted typhus. The head of the children's camp was Ante Vrban, and his right hand was Olga, a prisoner. Ante Vrban later confessed that he poisoned 63 sick children with Zyklon B. He estimated their ages from 2 to 12 years old. In 1942, when typhus began spreading among the inmates, Ante Vrban declared that if the disease was confirmed, he would blow up the camp. To protect the sick women, supervisors hid them in toilets, attics, and kept them working to avoid suspicion. However, as the number of ill inmates grew, it became impossible to conceal the outbreak. When Verban confronted the doctors about the situation, they assured him it was not typhus, but rather a severe flu exacerbated by malnutrition. Afterwards, they called typhus the city flu. Later, in 1942, Verban was transferred from the Jasenovac camp, and Olga, his helper, was killed by the Ustasha members because she was a witness to their many crimes. Ante Vrban then took part in military operations, and he fought with Croatian armed forces against Chetniks in the Battle of Lijevce field in the spring of 1945. The Croatian forces emerged victorious, resulting in several hundred Chetnik casualties and the capture of approximately 5,500 soldiers. This defeat significantly weakened the Chetnik movement in the region. The end of World War II in Europe in May 1945 marked the collapse of the Independent State of Croatia. The communist-led partisans under Josip Broz Tito took control of the territory, which led to the establishment of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, where Croatia became one of the constituent republics. At the end of the war, Ante Vrban withdrew to Austria, but in 1947 he and Ljubo Miloš, another Ustasha officer, illegally crossed the Yugoslav-Hungarian border with the intention of infiltrating Croatia with anti-communist guerrillas known as križari, meaning crusaders. The plan for an anti-communist uprising, however, did not work out. In the summer of 1947, the group of crusaders led by Ljubo Miloš was arrested on Papuk Mountain, and Ante Vrban was among them. Justice finally caught up with Verban when he was tried before the Supreme Court of the National Republic of Croatia. The trial was held in Zagreb in the summer of 1948, and Verban admitted his involvement in mass murders. For his crimes, Verban was sentenced to death by hanging. When on the 31st of August 1948, Ante Vrban was executed in Zagreb, he was 40 years old. There were no tears shed for Ante Vrban.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.